So, this week's parasha is Mishpatim. We're going to try and see how to apply the parasha to our daily lives. As a matter of fact, it's very easy. Why is it easy to apply Parashat Mishpatim to our daily lives?
What is Mishpatim?
What is Mishpatim? Beautiful. What does the word Mishpatim mean?
Law.
It means laws. Exactly that. How many types of laws do we have in Judaism? We have Mishpatim, we have Dinim, and we have Chukim. Mishpat means law. Dinim means laws. Chukim means laws. No, it's got to obviously mean something different. So Mishpatim means, like the word Mishpat is like a courtroom would be Bet HaMishpat, which is where you go to court and the judge rules. It's rulings that a human can logically appreciate and understand. Mishpatim are all laws, and that's why this whole parasha, which is called Mishpatim, are all laws that make sense. They add up. And as a matter of fact, they make so much sense that even if the Torah hadn't been given, probably human beings would come up with these fair laws themselves. We then have dinim. Din is like, this is the judgment, this is the ruling. And that applies to laws that we wouldn't have come up by ourselves with them. But once they're given, they actually, we understand them. So for example, the mitzvah of Shabbat, which is to rest on the seventh day, is a din, I believe. Because not necessarily that you would make it incumbent to have a day of rest. There's many countries that don't have such a rule. But once it's been given and we have this rule, does it make sense? Yeah, we appreciate it. It's actually okay. So that's the type of dinim. Again, it's rules that logic wouldn't dictate on its own. However, once it's given, it logically makes sense. And then you have chukim. And what is chukim? Which type? Good morning. What's chukim?
What doesn't make sense?
Laws that they are what we call to say doesn't make sense is not a nice way of saying, because when you say it's like, but chukim are laws that are super rational. They're above our grasping abilities. So what's an example of chukim? Kashrut. When the Torah says that you can't have a burger with the cheese, you say, why not? Anything I'll explain to you doesn't make sense. Doesn't add up. But we accept that this is what the Torah says, and that's why, fine. So last week was Parashat Yitro. This week is Parashat Mishpatim. Which laws make sense to follow the giving of the Torah? Chukim, Dinim, or Mishpatim? When the Torah says, okay, now when Hashem says, stand on Mount Sinai, I am your God, the entire nation stood there, they accepted the Torah, what would naturally flow from such a great experience? Laws that are very basic and any human being could come up with?
Yes.
Or laws that are godly, super rational?
Basic Chukim.
Chukim. Why basic? Basic is the whole idea of the Torah giving was up until now we were like everyone else. We had the laws of courts, rooms, we had the laws of nations, the laws of countries, the laws of the people. Suddenly Hashem gathers around Mount Sinai and he says, no, you're going to receive the Torah. The Torah is a new set of laws. It's something different, it's godly. So you would expect that Hashem says, here's why it's godly, here's why it's special. I have for you chukim. It's laws that you wouldn't understand, but you accept them because I'm God. This is what makes the system unique and different. There's also dinim. And finally, by the way, there's also mishpatim, which is similar to the rest of the world. They also have mishpatim. Every country has mishpatim. When you go to the courtroom, they talk about what happens if you abuse somebody, if you stole from somebody, if employer laws. We have these things. So that's not, and they appear in this week's parasha, but that's not unique to Judaism. Maybe our laws are a bit different, but still it's not unique. So you would think that they would come straight into dinim, but it doesn't. It starts with mishpatim. Not only does it start with mishpatim, it doesn't say eila mishpatim, these are the rules, but rather it says ve'eila, with a vav. This week's parasha Mishpatim, starts with the letter vav. What does the letter vav mean in Hebrew?
It's connected to the parasha before.
Correct. Ve means and. So what is like saying is 10 commandments and these laws between man and his fellow. Such a strong connection. So rabbis explain that the reason is because the whole idea of the giving of the Torah was not that we should be some kind of people that we have these laws which are spiritual, holy, and aloof. But rather, the idea of the Torah is that it should penetrate this world, and not only penetrate the world, but it should permeate even to the lowest ranks. The idea is that the wisdom of Hashem, the Torah, should reach to the bottom. So it's not starting off with the chukim, which are very spiritual laws, but it starts straight with the Mishpatim, laws between man and his fellow, how to be a good employer, which what you do employment is on the day-to-day. It should reach on our regular activities and engagements. But it's more than that. It's because Hashem wants the Torah to be part and parcel of you. And the best way that you appreciate and understand it then and own the Torah is, like we learned last night, Chokhmah Binah Da'at. When you really understand it, appreciate it, know it, and it makes sense logically. That way the Torah comes into you in the best possible way. So really the Torah says, on the one hand, we had last week giving of the Torah, which was a very spiritual experience. The people saw things that people had never seen. The Torah says they saw the voices. What does it mean they saw the voices? That usually you only hear it. It's like something which is, you hear, okay, I hear what you're saying, or we don't know it. When you see something, you own it. To see when people say, oh, I see what you say. Like, you really, when you see with your own eyes, you really understand it's one with you. That's the idea of the Torah. It needs to come all the way. So that's why we start straight away with Mishpatim. That's why it says in this week's parasha that when Hashem gave the Torah to the Jewish people, what was their response?
Naaseh v'nishma.
Naaseh v'nishma. You ever heard these words, Naaseh v'nishma? Okay. We will do and we will understand, we will hear. Because you have to have both. There has to be the Naaseh is, you understand, Hashem says that's it. I understand it comes from a God that is way above and beyond anything that I will ever grasp and understand. So therefore, whatever you say, I do. Finished. End of discussion.
Whereas it was offered to other nations, but others said...
They said, no, we want to understand. Yeah. What does it mean? It doesn't add up. We don't like it. But there's the combination, Naaseh v'nishma. Yitro Mishpatim is Naaseh v'nishma. Yitro is the Naaseh, Mishpatim is the Nishma. Yitro represents the idea of it being God said, so therefore it's good. Mishpatim shouldn't stay in that rank, but rather it should come down to understanding. That is why Parashat Yitro is which number in the sequence of the Parashiyot? From Bereshit all the way till Yitro. Yitro is number 17. 17 is numerical value of 17. 1 plus 7. Yeah, I'm saying the number 17, what does it add up? It adds up to the word Tov. Why? Tet is 9. Vav is 6. Bet is 2. So Parashat Yitro is good. Hashem giving us the Torah, we just accept that it's a great gift, it's a very good thing. However, Parashat Mishpatim is what number? 18. What is 18? Chai. It's the idea is it shouldn't only stay in the realm of good, but it should permeate our lives. We should live. We should feel our lives. The Torah is involved in our daily life. So that's really the idea of Parashat Mishpatim. That's the overarching concept of Parashat Mishpatim. Without even looking into one of the mitzvot, that we understand the transition from Yitro to Mishpatim. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So how many mitzvot in Parashat Mishpatim? 50 something. So here at the back on page,
Some to do and some not to do.
some positive, some negative, and we have on page 178, it tells us there's 23 positive and 30 negative. 53 commandments in this week's parasha. One of the most mitzvot in a single parasha. We have how much? 45 minutes left? Can we discuss all 53? What do you think? How many can we discuss? 10? Wishful thinking. But all these mitzvot actually represent the idea of how the Torah, the point that we just explained, that the Torah shouldn't stay aloof, but rather it should permeate our being, starting with the intellect, the cognitive, and flowing down to the emotive, the emotion, because that's the way it works. First you understand, then you feel. You only feel something based on what you understand. That's why children, for example, they're not scared of a lion. Take a 2-year-old and put a lion there. He doesn't, why? Because he doesn't understand it's dangerous. So only when you understand, you feel, I'm scared. And the same thing in the opposite feelings. Let's say You put a child with his grandma, he's never seen her before, doesn't love her, doesn't kiss her, nothing, big deal, doesn't mean anything. But if let's say he's 18 and he understands, he's never seen his grandma, and you tell him, this is your grandma, she came out of Poland or whatever, you give her a hug, kiss, and then why? Because he understands. So understanding nurtures feelings. And that's really the whole idea. So Parasat Mishpatim, in all the mitzvot, there is this point, this idea of how it trickles down and how it affects us in our day-to-day life. So let's see a few of these mitzvot and see how they apply to us. Now, I'm obviously not going to choose.
Sorry, are they mixed or like positive and negative?
Yeah, you have a mixed, positive, negative. They're not like 33 negative and 20 positive, no. So because
there's a reason?
I haven't checked it, go through it, but first it goes through different mitzvot. Some mitzvot have a positive and a negative within them. Let's say, for example, Shabbat is a positive mitzvah to keep Shabbat. So, Zachor et Yom Shabbat, and how to honor Shabbat and to light candles on Shabbat and to do certain things about Shabbat. But there's also a negative, not to desecrate Shabbat. So you're not allowed to turn on a fire on Shabbat and so on and so forth. So you have the positive and the negative within one mitzvah. And the same thing here, there's certain mitzvot that there's a positive side to it and a negative. So the Torah will not bring just the positive, go on to all other positive, come back to the same commandment and tell you the negative side.
Because there are two.
Right, once it's speaking about the mitzvah, will give the positive and the negative at the same time. So that's why you'll have it mixed. So let's start with the first one. The first mitzvah, which we see this exact same idea of the mitzvot not staying aloof, not staying something spiritual, but rather permeating the physical world. Nachon? That's what we're trying to see. So let's turn to page 163. 163. And that is verse 4. Verse 4 says like this. You have it on 163? If you come across your enemy's ox or his stray donkey, you must return it to him. So this tells us about donkeys, that if you find a donkey that's going away, you need to give it back. That's a mitzvah of Hashavat Avedah, returning lost object. Now, here it comes, it says like this, the next verse. Perhaps if you see your enemy's donkey lying under its load and you would want to refrain from helping it, however, you must help him unload. So what does that say? What's the mitzvah saying in verse 5? It's saying if you see the donkey of who?
An enemy.
Enemy. And what's happening to the donkey?
He's got a heavy load.
He's got a heavy load. And because of the heavy load, what's happening?
Collapsing.
He's collapsing, he's finding it hard. So what would you think in your mind to do, says the Torah? You might think not to help, and you say, it's my enemy, I'm not going to help him. Says the Torah, no, azov ta'azov imo, you need to help him. Straightforward commandment? Yeah. Now, how does this commandment apply to somebody who doesn't have enemies? If I don't have an enemy, then does this commandment apply? You know the story, there was once a rabbi, and he was talking about the concept that people shouldn't fight, and they shouldn't have enemies, and should have no enemies. So the rabbi was giving this whole speech, and then he turned around to the synagogue and he said, is there anyone in this room that has no enemies? So there was a woman, she was 95 years old, she was called Martha. She raised her hand, she said, I don't have any enemies. So the rabbi said, please come down, stand here next to me and tell everyone what did you do not to have any enemies? So she walks all the way down, she stands next to the rabbi and she says, I have no enemies because I've outlived them all. Anyway,
That's a good one.
when the Torah says a mitzvah that we should help our enemy. First of all, if somebody has no enemies, he says, okay, so this mitzvah doesn't apply to me. But what about today? I know in Gaza people still go around with donkeys, but here in London, do people have donkeys? How do we translate this mitzvah to our life here today? So a person may say, yeah, if he's got a flat tire, then help him. Right? It's the general concept of helping somebody who's got a load. And you think, he's my enemy, I don't want to help him, so you still need to help him, which is of course true. But that is only the external level of the mitzvah. as we've learned many times, every mitzvah has the neshama, has the deeper side. It has something which is always relevant, whether you have enemies or you don't, whether your neighbor has a donkey or he doesn't, whether somebody got stuck with his car or he didn't, this mitzvah still applies. And you will see that's exactly the theme of Parasat Mishpatim, which we said, of taking this spiritual holiness of Torah and applying it down. That's the whole idea, that it should be integrated within us on the most lowest physical, practical level. So the Baal Shem Tov explained this. He says what the Torah is saying on a deeper level, Ki tireh chamor sonacha, if you see the chamor can mean a donkey, but also in Hebrew the word chamor is the same word as chomer. What does chomer mean? Materialism. Materialism represents the physical, materialistic world. So when you meditate, you contemplate. Tireh means to see. When you see, and you think to yourself, look at this materialistic world. All my mistakes, all my issues, all my problems, all my desires, my temptations, where do they come from? The materialistic world. Correct? Many people, when they cheat and lie because they want to make some money so they can buy something materialistic. When they eat something they shouldn't be eating, it's because it's materialistic. When they engage in illicit relations because it's material. The material world is very tempting. The chomriyut, that's the word. In Hebrew we have two words, we have ruach and chomer. Ruach is spirit, chomer is material. So spirit is good for you. Spirit elevates you. So being spiritual would be a person who says, you know what? I want to be a spiritual person. So what am I going to do? I want to disengage from this chomer, materialistic world. I run away from it. I'll have nothing to do with it. Kitir chamor sonachai. Why is it called sonachai? Is your enemy. What is our biggest enemy? The Yetzer Hara. What is the Yetzer Hara? The Yetzer Hara talked to us about spiritual things, or they talked to us about materialistic things. Materialistic things, the whole thing of Yetzer Hara is all about materialism. So you say, my enemy, the Yetzer Hara, the materialistic side of things, is bogging me down. It's distracting me. It's holding me back. You say to yourself, you know what? I'm not going to help him. I'm going to have nothing to do with him. I want to run away. You know, other religions, they have this concept. So for example, Buddhist monks, what did they say? Materialistic world is too tempting, too troubling, too bothering. You go live in a mountain, you go to a monastery, and you meditate, you see it, right? You pray, you study, and you just spend your whole life over there. Christians, for example, they say, men and women is an issue, it's a problem. You want to be spiritual, you can't be with a woman. So therefore, priests, anyone who wants to be spiritual, must be celibate. He can never get married. Right? You know the story, there was once a rabbi and a priest, and they were sitting at a wedding, and the priest was having this hamburger, like a nice piece of pork, and he turns to her and says, you don't understand what you're missing. I know the Torah says you can't have meat of a pork, but this is delicious, it's unbelievable, you got to taste this. So the rabbi says, no, it's not tempting. He says, no, I'm telling you something. When, Rabbi, when are you going to taste this? So the rabbi looks at him and says, you know what, I'll taste it. He says, when? He says, at your wedding. They have this thing where they run away. Tells you the Torah, no. The whole concept of the Torah is not that we run away from the materialistic world. Azov, ta'azov, imo. You need to work with the materialistic world. Help it, elevate it. The whole concept of Torah is that it should penetrate this physical, materialistic world. That's why we start with Yitro, and it goes straight into Mishpatim. You understand? The same exact concept. So steaks, fancy food, cakes, whatever, they bog you down materialistic. Instead of saying, I'm not having to do with it, you say, no, I want to use it to become more spiritual. How do we use it to become more spiritual? So for example, Sudat Shabbat, it says on Friday Shabbat, you should have a nice meal to honor Shabbat. So you say, this is when I'll have it. Let's say clothes. A person can say, all this fashion business nonsense, it's so materialistic, so I don't have anything to do with it, I'm just going to wear regular shmatas. But a person says, no, but I want to work with the world. So what do? You say on Shabbat, you need to wear nice clothes in honor of Shabbat. So I'll get the nice clothes and wear it for Shabbat. A person may say, you know what, cars, such a Yetzer Hara, this car, fancy car. So a person say, you know what, I want to get a nice car, but I'm going to use it. Because I enjoy riding in my car, I'm going to use it to go to Minyan in the morning. It will encourage me to go to shul rather than stay in bed. Or I know I can give somebody a ride. I can do a mitzvah with it. You can use the materialism for Kedusha. I went to the story about There was a big rabbi who was called Reb Shmelka of Nikolashburg. And he said, he was like these type of people who say, you know what, you run away from the world, less materialism, the best. He was so away from it that he didn't even want to sleep, because sleeping is a materialistic experience. It holds you down. So what he would do is he would study all day, but he would fall asleep. So what to do? He didn't want to sleep too much. So he took a candle, and he would light the candle and would hold it between his fingers. So if he fell asleep, what would happen eventually, the flame would reach the fingers and it would burn him, and it would wake him up, and he would continue studying. So I don't know if you ever seen Shtisel?
Yes.
So there's a scene there where the boy is learning and he puts his feet in a bucket of ice. You ever seen that? No, we missed it. Because that's also the point. People will find all different ways that they shouldn't be too comfortable materialistically. Anyway, so one day Rabbi Melech of Lizhensk, he saw the rabbi doing this thing with the candle, and told him it's wrong. You must not do that. You have to have a good night's sleep. And he forced him to take away the candle. He put him into bed. He was this big rabbi. Not only put him to bed, he tucked him in. He said, Shema Yisrael, have a good sleep. And it was the first time in his many years, I don't know, in his life, in many years, they had a good night's sleep. When he woke up in the morning after a good 8 hours, he opened his Talmud and he started studying, and suddenly he understood it in such a way because he had a fresh mind. So he went to the rabbi and he says, you don't know what you've done? He said, I've discovered through you that having a good night's sleep, which is such a materialistic thing, can be such a spiritual experience. Why? Because it was thanks to that he straight away went into his studies in a totally different level. So that's what the Torah is saying. Don't run away from your enemy and say, I don't have anything to do with him, but rather azov ta'azov him.
So the enemy is the material.
Of course, on a simple level, it could be your neighbor or your enemy. Your cousin, your brother-in-law, the one you don't talk to, right? You got to speak to and help him, and don't allow it to get in between you. But on a deeper level, what it's saying is that we all have materialistic enemy. So donkeys is not only for once upon a time, but the donkey is here. It's here today. It's called the chomer. Do you understand? So that's one mitzvah. So here you see how Parasat Mishpatim is a follow-up to Parashat Yitro, from the good to the life. With the idea of the Torah, the good, the mitzvot, need to make our lives elevated. Do you understand? Okay. Then we have another mitzvah. What's the next mitzvah which we see? So it's a mitzvah which has to do with judges. And what does the mitzvah which has to do with judges say to us? It says, where are the judges? Here we go. On page 165. Judicial laws, which follows actually just the mitzvah that we just learned. Straight after the mitzvah of not neglecting your own materialistic side, but rather taking it with you on the journey and elevating it. The Torah tells us in verse 8. You have it, verse 8? Do not accept a bribe, for a bribe blinds the eyes of those who can see, i.e. Torah scholars, and corrupts righteous words. What is the simple meaning of this mitzvah? Not to take bribery. So if you're a judge in court, you mustn't be bribed. And why? What happens if a person takes a bribery? It's not true justice. The fact that you've given the money, you are no longer able to see things in the right way. And I once heard a story of a judge who came in to the courtroom, and as he came in, everyone stood up. He sat down. He said, before I begin, he said, I got to call this party and give them £5,000. He said, let me explain. He said, yesterday, 2 lawyers of each party came to see me. One gave me £15,000 in an envelope, and the other side gave me £10,000 in an envelope. I don't want to be bribed, so here's the 5,000 to the ones that gave me 15. So now I've only received 10 and 10 from both. Everything's equal. I can reside on the judgment, and I won't be bribed. But the simple meaning is, of course, if a person gives you a bribe, then you're corrupt. But the Torah says, it adds, it doesn't just say don't take a bribe. What does it continue? What does it say? כי השוחד יעבר פיקחים ויסלף דברי צדיקים. It says even if you're a Torah scholar, even if you are a righteous person, you still will be affected by the bribery. Rabbis tell us, because of this commandment, that even a scholar, even a person who's a tzaddik, even if a person is vitzalef divrei tzaddikim, tzaddik is someone at a very high level, and can be bribed. So the rabbis and the sages of the history were very, very careful not to take a bribe. Well, obviously, what does it mean? Of course, they weren't going to take 5,000 pounds. But even something which may be a subtle bribe, they wouldn't accept. So, for example, the Gemara tells a story. There was a Kohen, who was one of the big judges. I think his name was Rabbi Ishmael. And Kohanim get different portions from the people. The Torah gave them 42 gifts they have. So Pidyon Haben, they have Trumot, Masrot, etc. One of them is called Reshit Hagez, which is farmers who they would shear the wool of the animals. The first section that comes off, they have to give to the Kohen. Also Chala. You know Chala, when you do Chala, I'm sure you've done the Chala bake, you got to take off a Fashat Chala. It was given to the Kohen. So not only Chala, but also because people were farmers. Today we don't have sheep, most people. But then they would take the first portion of the wool and they would give it to the Kohen. So this farmer, he came to Rabbi Ishmael and he said, here, I've given you some, I'm following the mitzvah which I need to do, I'm giving you the wool. So Rabbi Ishmael said to him, but you live far away. How come you made all the journey to come and to give me the wool? There's many other Kohanim you could have given it to. So he said, yeah, because I also have a court case. And I'm anyway coming to Yerushalayim because that was where the Beit Din is. So I figured I'm coming here, I might as well do two in the same. So you're the Kohen, here's the wool, and now I want to have a court case. So Rabbi Ishmael said to him, I'm sorry, I am? He said, no, he said, I cannot. No, you can take the Torah said he gets the wool. He took the wool, he said, but I cannot reside on your case. I'm prevented from being your judge. Why? Because you have now bribed me. But why has he bribed him? He deserved it. It was his to begin with. When the Torah says you got to give the first shearing of the wool, it belongs to the Kohen. But he said, no, this is something which is a subtle bribery. The Gemara goes even further and says that there was once a rabbi that he had a worker. And the worker worked in his field and he would cut the fruit for the rabbi and bring it to the rabbi once a week. So it was whose fruits? The rabbi's fruit. And he would bring it every day on a Thursday. One week he came to the rabbi and he brought it on a Wednesday. So the rabbi said, why you bring it to me today early? Because I have to travel to Jerusalem. This is where the courtroom is. I have a court case. So the rabbi said, I'm sorry, I can't judge because I am bribed. Bribed what? Which bribery? He gave him his fruit. It's my fruit. It was the rabbi's field. The man worked for the rabbi. He got wage for it. Do you understand? And he was bringing the rabbi his own fruit. But he brought it a day early. So the rabbi says, I'm sorry. And there's many other stories. In the time we see how subtle a person can be bribed. So that's the mitzvah. But the person may ask a question and say, okay, I get it. Bribery is so tough. But even for a tzaddik, I can understand when the Torah says, Ki hashochad yaver ene anashim. If it would say bribery can bribe and can cover the wool over the eye of simple people or regular people. But tzaddikim. If I told you the Baba Sadi got bribery, you would believe. Told the Rebbe got bribery. The Rambam, you bribe him. It makes sense. How's that possible? So, rabbis explain that the reason is, you need to study Kabbalah to really fully appreciate this. But even without studying full Kabbalah, you can understand that what comes first? What's the order of the soul? Which is the higher, more deeper part of the soul? Our desire or our intellect? What comes first? The desire, and that therefore affects our intellect, or our intellects come first and it affects the desire? Kabbalah teaches us that ratzon, desire, comes before intellect. Do you remember? So because desire is before intellect, so desire manipulates intellect. Meaning when you want something, when you have a feeling, a wanting for something, then you can then what happens is, because it's on a level higher and above, it's, when I say high and above and precedes the intellect, it means that in the soul, when the root of the soul, the depth of the soul, more or less, because you have the soul, you have the kochot nefesh, which is the abilities, the powers of the soul. But then there's what makes the powers of the soul tick, and that is the desire. The desire causes the soul, the powers of your soul. And part of your power, desire of the soul is your intellect. We learned in the Kabbalah course, if you remember. Once a person is bribed, where does bribery reach? It reaches the ratzon, it reaches your desire. Because when you've been bribed by somebody, you want his good. You want him to prevail. And because you want him to prevail, it will distort your intellect.
Which is what you need for.
Which is what you need for judgment. As a matter of fact, the rabbis actually tell in the end of those stories, in both cases, so the rabbis couldn't adjudicate for those people, and they went to another court. But they said, you know what, let's go and hear what happens. And they went and they sat as observers, and they reported that all along the court case, all they could see was favor of the person who had bribed them. All they could see was why they're right. And they said, thank God that we weren't there, because I wouldn't be impartial, I wouldn't be objective. It blinded them. How? Because shochad reaches all the way to ratzon. Do you understand? So therefore, even a tzaddik, he's got his order of his soul, of his neshama, the way things function. And once it touches the will, the desire, you can't control it anymore. So that's what the halakha is. But how does that apply to us? We're not judges. Who can raise their hand here in this room and say, yeah, I go every day to the high court room of London? We don't. Not even the small claims court. So what's irrelevant to us? And the answer is because we're all judges for ourselves. We have dilemmas. What's the right thing to do? And we have to judge. We have to make a decision. But we must understand that we have desires, we have temptations. Which temptations? From the Yetzer Hara. Remember we said before, Kitire Chamor Sanacha, you have the inclination, you have the materialistic world, which is bribing us. You have these billboards. Miami, Mauritius, Maldives, a chocolate bar on the television, right? And you see the person licking his, wow, I'm going to have it. You see a car, and he's driving up a hill, or whatever it may be. You see clothes, you see a shampoo and their hair. All this materialism is bribing us. So how do I make the decision? So I've got an option. Either I go to a Pilates class, or I can go to a Chumash class, or whatever it may be. I'm sure that you have all this, and it's explaining to you, it's good for your body, it's healthy. On the other hand, my neshama. So which one? So because the desire is so strong, the Torah is telling us, it will manipulate your logic, your intellect, and therefore you won't be able to make the right decision, even if you're a righteous person. So what do you need? You need what's called someone who's impartial, someone who's not bribed. And who is that? That's why it says in Pirkei Avot, Aselech Harav. Every single person has to have a mentor, a guide. Mentor doesn't necessarily have to be somebody who's such a scholar or so knowledgeable and knows every single halakha. It's somebody who's actually just has to be a wise person. He's got his feet rooted strongly on the ground. The person who's Yireh Shamayim, who's God-fearing, and he's spiritual. And that's a person that you feel comfortable to share with him your personal life and say to them, what should I do? What's the right thing? It's not because they're wiser than you. It's not because they have even more spiritual, because they're not bribed. They don't have the temptation that you are, because it's not in their ratzon, it's not in their desire. It's your desire, not theirs. So therefore they can give you an impartial and an objective guidance. Exactly the same thing. What is the Torah? This, you see, is the same point of Itra Mishpatim. The idea is that the Torah should permeate your body, that it should affect the whole system, that it should affect desire and intellect. Do you understand that the mitzvot shouldn't stay aloof, but rather that you should change yourself. You should change your desire to want good things. You should change your intellect to think and want the right thing and do what's best for you. Again, you see this concept of how understanding that we as human beings have things that pull us in different directions, and the whole idea and our desire, even on our most elevated, loftiest parts, which is the root of our soul, which is our desire, and the Torah is there to help us have the right desire, have the right intellect, the right understanding, because the world can bribe us. The only way that we can be not bribed is through guidance, through wisdom, through Torah, impartial. So again, the idea of it affecting us. And this brings us to our third and final point, because if you think that studying or Torah cannot affect the person even on the root in the deepest part, here the Torah teaches us, it's going to show us the most amazing thing of how the effect of Torah, of words, power, etc., in the internal, the most deepest parts of our soul. And this is one of the most amazing, fascinating verses in the entire Torah. And actually, it's unique to Parasat Mishpatim. A verse like this doesn't appear in the whole Torah. What is this verse? I'm not going to have you look through the whole thing, bore you, take you a long time. But I'll show it to you straight away. And here again, you see that why you need to learn in the original language. Because when you study in translated language, gets lost in translation. Let's have a look at the verse. On verse 22.
Which page?
Page 161. Page 161,
22.
verse 22. So the title of the entire section is called Helping the Unfortunate and Respecting Leaders. So with regards to helping the unfortunate, the Torah tells us like this. Verse 21. It says, "You shall not oppress any person, especially a widow or an orphan. For if you do oppress him, beware. If he cries out to me, I will hear his cry." So what does it say? What does the Torah say?
It's a threat.
It's a threat. That's right. The Torah is saying, I will hear his cry. So therefore we should be sensitive and caring to widows, to orphans, because naturally they're more vulnerable. And therefore Hashem is even more sensitive to their cause. Why does the Torah only tell us not to be unkind to widows and to orphans? What about regular people? Are we allowed to?
No.
No. What the Rashi points out, and he says,
Especially.
if the Torah is telling us those especially, but of course anyone who's in between. In any case, why is this verse lost in translation? Anyone read Hebrew?
Okay.
Let's look at it together, verse 22. What does it say? Im aneh te'aneh oto. What does im aneh te'aneh oto mean? If you will oppress it. Kim tza'ok yitzak elai. What does that mean?
He's going to scream to me.
He's going to scream to me. Shamoa eshma tza'akato. I will listen. Is that really, have you not translated it properly? Was that a good translation? No, it wasn't. Why was it not a good translation?
Shamash.
Let's start again. Im aneh te'aneh. What does that mean? What does le'anot mean?
To torture.
Oppress. So, let's translate it. Im aneh te'anoto. If oppress, aneh. What's te'aneh?
To oppress.
So, the translation is like this. If oppress, you will oppress him. How many times? Oppress, you will oppress him. Next one. Kim tza'ok yitzak elai. What does that mean? Tza'ok means he will cry out. So, Kim tza'ok, he will cry. What's the next word? Yitzak. So, cry, he will cry. Then, what does it say? Shamoa eshma. Hear, I will hear. What's unique about this verse? Have you got it already?
It's to reflect, like, whatever you do.
Everything it says twice. Oppress, you will oppress. Cry, he will cry. Hear, I will hear. Is that the way you write? I could have just said, Im ta'aneoto, ki tza'ak elai, eshma tza'akato.
It repeats.
Of course it repeats. Like, imagine you're reading the
It's stronger.
Imagine reading the verse in Genesis. Bereshit bara Elokim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz, right? Bereshit ba-bereshit. In the beginning, at the beginning, God, the God, created. What does that mean? Look at any other verse. It does
It's
this.
a mirror.
A mirror. What does that mean? It's a mirror.
What you do, then I will.
Yeah, but that's every verse. Okay, so
No, what you do, I will do.
I understand, but It's in any verse. Let's say it's the
verb and the active.
what?
It's the verb and the active, which makes it stronger, more powerful than just to say or just to use the verb as an active and that's it.
So why is it only in this verse? This is the only verse in the entire Torah that needs to be stronger.
Because
In the
when-
Torah it says, "Lo tignov." Is that an important one? Is that abusing, causing trouble and pain to widows is more than lo tignov? What about lo tirtzach?
But those are rules.
This is also a rule.
Yeah, but this is in a different way. It's like more logical. They give you the logic.
Why lo tirtzach is not logical?
They give you the logic behind it.
What's
They
the
say-
logic behind it?
The logic behind it is if there will be a cry for help, I will hear the cry for help. Which means like it's the verb and the active.
So if you would have said it once, I wouldn't understand. If you oppress them, I know will cry. I will hear the cry. Could have said it once.
Maybe because the widow and the orphan haven't got anyone else beside Hashem. No?
I understand. So why does it need to repeat it? What? When the Torah says the word, by the way, there are other places in the Torah where the word is repeated twice. But it's only once. There is no other verse in the entire Torah that you have the words repeated 3 times. This is the only one.
Where tree.
So
In one verse, Aneh te'aneh, Tza'ok itzak,
Oh, shoot.
Shamoa shema.
Oh, okay.
You have the same word twice, 3 times in the same verse.
In the translation, it's also pressed twice, cries twice, but not. the
Why? I
last-
don't see that.
Yeah, you shall not oppress.
That's it,
If
once.
you do oppress,
No, okay. Again, once.
okay. If he cries out
True.
to me, I will hear his cries.
Yeah,
It's
okay.
mentioned twice. But
What?
The third one's not mentioned twice. Which was the word?
And it's-
Which was the third word?
No, it's not. The word, it's because they're translating it here. Imitzak elai, shamoa shema tzakatos. Then, okay, here it's 3 times. Do you understand? I will hear his cry, but it definitely doesn't say the 2 words together. Not in English, not even once.
Okay,
Huh?
not together.
So why here? Well, there's many explanations. The simple explanation is that because a widow or an orphan doesn't have somebody to protect them, so when you cause them trouble, it's a double trouble. Why is it a double trouble? Because number one, you're causing them the pain. Number two, they're reminded that they don't have something to protect them. Meaning they say, oh, if I had my husband, I had my father, my mother, they would protect me right now. So by you causing them that pain, it's double. Our rabbis also tell us that because when you cause trouble to an orphan or to a widow, the parent or the sibling, the spouse, is also being pained. They're watching from above. And they feel pain for their child. So there is a double pain. Everything's double over here. So that's why the Torah says it twice. That's some of the commentaries. But there is another explanation. There is another deep explanation. And what this deep explanation is telling us is like this. Most people, when they get abused or oppressed, somebody hit them, somebody made a mockery of them, all these things. So what do? So let's take a child, for example. So we're talking about here is an orphan who was oppressed. Someone made fun of him, a regular child is not an orphan. So after somebody made fun of him, what happens? What does a child who's been oppressed, what does he do? Cries, then he goes home and he tells his mommy or his father, so and so made fun of me, they laughed at me. What do their parents say? They say, he's only saying it, he doesn't really mean it. Or they say, okay, he's a bad boy, he's stupid, don't take it to heart. So what they do is they remove the oppression that's happened through soothing words. So therefore it goes away. Also, let's say someone beat you up or whatever. So it's very painful. If you have somebody who protects you, so then they go back to that kid, they punish them, they hit them. So you feel it's come to a closure and it's removed. But when you have an orphan who doesn't have the ability to share their pain or suffering, what happens is this oppression is not only once, continues. That's what the Torah is trying to tell us. Because there's no one that actually removed it, so it multiplies. It continues and it stays, it affects their soul, the neshama, so deep that it stays forever. So what Hashem is saying, oppress, because you're oppressing him now. But that oppression continues. So he repeats it. Here I will hear. I hear it now, and I will hear it later as it continues. Cry, he will cry. He's crying now, but he will also continue crying for many years. Do you understand? Because when a person is in such a vulnerable situation and nothing removes it, keeps on continuing, which is very strong words. You know, there was once a rabbi, he shared with me, he said that he was at a certain simcha, I think it was a bar mitzvah. A friend had invited him. And at the bar mitzvah, his friend, who was the father of the boy, said to him, tell me, no? Has something come out of me, or am I such a loser? And he said, what? Why are you asking me this question? And he said, do you remember? So this guy is doing a bar mitzvah for his son. They're dancing around in circles, and he turns around to his friend from the old days in yeshiva. They're now in their 40s and 50s, and he says, has something come out of me, or am I a loser? And he said, why are you asking me this? And he said, do you remember when we were in school? My teacher, our teacher, always used to say to me, nothing's going to ever come out of you. I said, do you remember? He said, no, I don't remember. He said, well, he did. He said it to me a few times in class. And he said, ever since then, it's been bugging me. It's been on a chip on my shoulder. It's been walking with me throughout my life, that nothing ever good is going to come out of me. So I'm asking you now, has anything ever good? You say, look, he said, so the rabbi said, of course. I told him, what are you talking about? You're married, you have an amazing wife, you have 4 kids, you make your bar mitzvah, you're doing so special. Forget about what this guy said. He said, you know how hard it is for me? Thank God that it's the first time I'm actually sharing this with somebody, and thank you for telling me this. Could you imagine a man who was carrying this for so many years that somebody had told him something so negative? Power words. And I just heard, it's interesting, I'm just mentioning it as a side thing. Rabbi Lionel Rosenfeld, you know Lionel Rosenfeld? He told us that when he was the teacher or madrich of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. And he said Jonathan Sachs was a very shy, inward type of person. And he said that when he was in his camp or when he was looking, he thought to himself, this kid, what's gonna come out of him? He never said it to him, but he thought. And he said, little did I know, all these years later, what an amazing person. So I'm just thinking, imagine he would have said it to him. Could you imagine he could have ruined him? The fact that he didn't say anything, and look what came. So you see that sometimes when you hold back on saying something to somebody, I'm not saying because he didn't say it, maybe if he would have said it was still, but you see the power of the words of people.
We have teeth to protect our mouths before we speak.
Yes. Emily said we have teeth to protect our mouth. Well, I think you say
to protect what you're about to say.
What I think you're saying is like this: all our bodies, orifices that have an external that can come out, something like an opening. So either there's total opening, or there's one closure. The only opening that we have, so let's say our eyes, there's one closure, there's our eyelids. Some areas, for example, there's no closure. But our mouth, which is nothing, has 2. You have our teeth and our lips. Why do you have 2? Because you need to double think before you speak. That's the point. Let's say this: a teeth and our lips.
Isn't it wrong to think it though? This rabbi who had all this.
Well, of course he's sharing it and say, look, I saw this kid so shy, so this. I thought he wasn't saying it in a negative, like there's nothing going to come out of you. He's saying if somebody's so shy and so an introvert, how's he going? Is he going to be able to have an effect? He was like being so shy and so introvert. He felt himself, like he's going to be a regular person. He's not going to affect the world. And he was saying, little did I know, he became Rabbi Sachs, the person in the whole world, Jewish world was affected by him, many people. I didn't say to him, God forbid. I'm just saying, you see, sometimes when you say something, it can have such terrible consequences. Remember we were learning the course of the Holocaust. So we shared the story of a woman who said that when she was she said the biggest regret on life, which she's carried her whole life, was when she was on a cattle cart going to Auschwitz. She didn't know. And she was 15 and her brother was 8. And he kicked off his shoes because he was hot. When they got off at the train, when they arrived at Auschwitz, he forgot his shoes inside the cattle cart. And she said to him, what are you doing? You forgot your shoes. This is such a precious thing. And she really screamed at him. Moments later, he was taken to the right or to the left, whatever it was, and he died. And she said that she realized that the last words she spoke to her brother was reprimand, and she told him off and she screamed at him. and she had never an opportunity to say I'm sorry and to soothe him. And she said, therefore, she resolved that she would never ever say words to somebody that if those were the last words, she would regret it for the rest of her life. Meaning that she would always try and say something that the words, something that she's happy that those words would be the last words that they say to that person. It's a very tall order for us to say. But the point is that you see the effect of words. The Torah is teaching us here that you say one word, ane te'aneoto. You say one, it will last forever. Shama eshma, I will hear. This is how powerful words that a person says and does affecting the neshama. Why does this connect to our theme, what we're talking about? Because that's exactly the point of Yitro and Mishpatim. The effect of the Torah is a ripple effect. It can last forever. Don't underestimate. It's not about running away, but rather affecting. So if negative words can affect a person for 20, 30 years, how much more so positive words? And that's all idea Hashem is saying. I'm giving you the Torah in Parasat Yitro, which is tov, which is good, because it needs to permeate and affect the world. It needs to permeate and affect you and change you as a person. If you think a big deal, so I'll study one chumash, I'll study one line, it's not going to make a difference. Today I'll come in, tomorrow I'll go. If negatively it can do that, how much more so positively? If the words or something can affect the ratzon of a tzaddik, like we learned before in the mitzvah before, how much more so the Torah can affect us and change us and make us better people. So that's why Ele HaMishpatim, realize the power of the Torah. The whole idea of spirituality is to permeate, be part of the world, change us from within, but for positive. Change the world for positive. Don't run away from that responsibility. That's the message of the parasha.